Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour today is going to be more general discussion about virtual media production, but most days we specialize on something. Tomorrow we'll be actually we're going to do an experiment. A lot of times in after hours, we go into doing watch parties, but tomorrow we're going to try to do a watch party in here. And so actually in here, Maxon is going to be releasing new products. So it'll be their 3D products, their 2D products, their compositing products. And then we're talking about it for an hour. So we're going to try putting it into office hours since it's the same day that we normally would cover that subject matter and see how it turns out. We had a great after hours session watching the BlackMagic launch yesterday. So that was a lot of fun. And if you'd like to find out more about what we do, go to officehours.global. We have a whole schedule there and videos from the past. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And Bill, what do we got?
Our first one comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. And he says, can we discuss the new offerings from BlackMagic Design announced yesterday?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So there's a couple of things that are quite interesting. So I think the workflow stuff, which is going to be their cloud solution, is going to be something that I don't use day in, day out. But it's going to be something that will affect a lot of people, even though they said the multicam stuff. So you can actually have multicams coming in and you have a group of editors behind making edit for the multicam stuff that's live. So that's a pretty cool solution you can actually do. You can do color correction and then, within probably 10 minutes of the show ending, you can probably have a product up. So that's a pretty cool solution rather than always just putting up the live stream and then dragging it down and putting up an edited version. You can actually do it that way. The other thing is kind of the Hyperdeck, which is designed to go with the Extreme, so the same kind of form factor as the Extreme, which is quite nice. I'd like to know whether it can record program out, because they said it'll be a good main recorder, but whether you can have program out be one thing and playback being another, whether they can do both at the same time, but they didn't say that. So, but that may be a firmware update. And then the other probably big thing that was announced was probably Resolve 18. So, but that's in beta, so we'll have more to talk about that once we can play with it more.
Yeah, Mitchell?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that show was seeing that cloud technology that they're talking about, which in essence is sort of cloud and definitely a lot of NAS going on there. But the idea that you could shoot, edit, and color correct all at the same time with the same group of people. They had a room full of people doing that, and it was just banging it right out, right onto the timeline. So I hope that it's as easy as they showed it to be. On the Hyperdeck side, I've had a few Hyperdecks, and I'm unhappy with all of them. This one looks promising, though, and the idea that it has that nice jog wheel on there seems like a logical way to use it. I'm going to use it for playing media clips, and maybe I'll try it out as a teleprompter, but all good things. But the sound that we didn't hear was what's up with 4K on our Mini Extremes and so forth.
I doubt that. It doesn't. The thing is, I think that 4K and the minis is probably not going to ever happen because it's not practical. It doesn't make any sense, for the way that they were structured. And you have to remember that it requires 4 times the processing to do that. A 4K image is 4 times as many pixels, not twice as many. And so it pushes all the expense up. And once you start paying more money for all those processors, you might as well just make it a bigger box. Go ahead, Bill.
So I just want to laud Grant and the whole BlackMagic crew. They continue to push the industry forward in useful and sensible ways, and they get their products out fast. The products work generally really, really well. It was really interesting. I mean, they're obviously pushing this idea of collaborative editing in the cloud that everybody's been heading for. All the big companies have kind of known it was coming, but they seem to be doing it in practical ways. This idea of mirrored pools of content, that they are among the different companies that are working on, so that you can have the new desktop server, which I think starts at 20 terabytes and goes up, and then they use Dropbox, which to me was a little bit weird. At least that's what Grant talked about. Maybe there will be other cloud portals for your actual material.
Well, I think that you can be your own cloud portal. I mean, I think that that's something we were talking a little bit about in After Hours, is that you can have a larger one of these be the hub. Literally, this is the hub, and you don't need it's like, yeah, sure, you can use Dropbox, but you can also just have it be your piece of hardware.
That synchronization of all the content, though, in the cloud is one of the hubs of this, and everybody's been trying to work right. It was interesting to me also that they're using an email process to sync the thin client files back and forth. That was pretty innovative. At least I haven't heard anybody else talking about doing that. So we'll see how it works out. But overall, just thank you, Blackmagic, for continuing to push all the other big companies forward. I think this is going to have ripples into Avid, into Premiere, certainly into Apple's Final Cut, although they're probably doing something different over there and you never know about them. But it's a move forward for the editing and content industry, I think.
I think that's what's funny is that they often give me things that they don't give me what I asked for, like video routers and 8K cameras, but they give me things that I didn't think I needed. And I'm like, oh, now I really need that. So, and we've done a lot. I think one of the things I'll say is that we've done a lot of distributed production. So, we've had the edit happening in Sacramento, or, and then the color being done in New York and the sound being done in Manila. And, that's something that we've already been doing, and it's been really painful, passing DERP files around and trying to figure this all out. And it would be this, I just see, I would have budgeted just to have this hardware and everybody's, and then we're all working on it. It would have been life-changing, to do this. So I think that we should not underestimate how powerful what they just put out is. It really, for production, could change many things. Go ahead, Jason.
Just on a more esoteric note, it never ceases to amaze me how well Grant simply states things that are problems in the industry. He states them clearly. He flips them on their head, like, the cloud subscription that the users hate, and the way that VC, kind of drives the innovation in tech today, and then presents a solution that is very well thought out and completely, industry changing.
He has the advantage that he's selling hardware. So it's still a hardware. This is a hardware solution to a software problem, but done better. With the hardware, it will run better than it did in the software.
Well, absolutely. Oh, and one more thing. I had to listen to it again after the after hours, but I believe in the next month or so, he mentioned that Google Drive will also be supported. They missed their deadline on that. So another month or so, and Dropbox will not be your only option.
And I would definitely, not use this in real production when it comes out. This is definitely one of the most aggressive things that Blackmagic's done, and it will be rough. I think that we should try to figure out how we get some hardware for office hours. We can use office hours projects and take the bullets and figure out what's going on. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I will be. I've already got my schedule time for Blackmagic at NAB, so I'll be looking at those things first thing, either Sunday or Monday. Which is great. I'm really excited about the cloud store, mostly because of the fact that can transform a classroom, because you can have let's say you have like a one-on-one interview type situation. You can get that recorded 20-minute conversation. Then they could start editing that while you'd go on to another conversation. Mm-hmm. The only question I have is, how is it going to work with a cross-platform? If somebody's on Final Cut, if somebody's on Resolve, how that will all work?
I don't think that they're worried about that. I think they're taking a page from Apple there. It's like, hey, Resolve is going to work really well, and the other stuff, you can do something with it, but it's not going to be.
But you do have an editor that's probably going to be on Final Cut, and somebody that's cutting color in a different program, and
that's not usually what happens. Usually, what happens is it just everyone starts going to the app that makes the most sense for the production, and so like I was talking to Fenwick about this the other day. When I'm working fast. I'm generally, I'll go into Final Cut and hack something out. As soon as I say, oh, I'm going to do this with color, like as soon as I'm going to manage color and manage audio and surround or whatever, this is now a Resolve project. I'm no longer I'm not trying to get from Final Cut to Resolve. I just edit it in Resolve. I'm going to Resolve timeline open right now. Go ahead, Courtney.
I agree with a lot of what the other people said, and I'm thrilled to hear that they're going to support another drive sync other than Dropbox. That would be great. I was also interested to see the improvements made to the Fairlight section, which is they're really going after Avid and the Pro Tools market to try and consolidate all that to make collaboration a lot easier, to bring in different mixers for, let's say, the dialogue mixer and the sound effects mixer and the music mixer all into a single timeline. And incorporate those subsections. That's new for the Fairlight. And that makes it a much more full-featured sound editorial that is bundled for free in with a $300 software.
Yeah, and for me, as someone who buys a lot of Blackmagic cameras, is the other reason. When you buy the cameras, you get the software. So I have so many, like, it's always easy for me to just throw another Dissolve thing on because I've got like 12 or 15 licenses laying around that let's put it on this computer and this computer. And so it's really, it's very, very disruptive. I mean, I think that we should not underestimate how disruptive Blackmagic is in the industry, because they just have, I think they right now have more engineers working on Resolve than any other companies working on video editing right now, or all of those. I think that there's just I've heard it's hundreds. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a big team that's building that, and you can see it by the feature sets coming out. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think Max Tech just did a YouTube video on the speed of each of the rendering platforms, and with the new updates, Davinci beats out even Final Cut Pro for rendering. And I thought it was pretty interesting because Premiere was at least 3 times slower for the same output. I think they were trying different, 6K, 8K versions, and it was pretty incredible to see the difference. Davinci Resolve, that is definitely their play. They're going after Adobe's subscription model, I think.
Yeah, I think that Final Cut's in a pretty good position, but I think that Premiere and Avid have some reckoning coming, because you have 2 apps that cost $300 once. And if that, and then there, so that you're paying constantly for these other apps that I don't think that they're keeping up with at the same production level. These 2 apps are optimizing for the Mac. They are showing huge performance gains. Apple is putting a lot of stuff in that's going to be future looking as far as some of the 3D and so on and so forth. While Resolve is just throwing in everything else and making it all work. It's really complicated right now, I think, for Adobe and Avid. Next question.
Next one comes from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He says, Noah, I heard you're building a team to cover NAB Live with help from the Office Hours community. What do you have in place so far, and how can we help?
I thought that softball was really, the arc was really nice. It was just it was not off to the side. It wasn't like a curveball. It was just this nice swing. Go ahead, Noah.
Woof on this one now. So we're building a team, and basically how it's going to work, we're going to have boots on the ground, right? Different teams. We're probably going to do 3 or 5 teams, and those folks are going to interview people, right? And we'll basically bounce between each one of those teams and do live interviews. And the power that we have is really built on the Mukana platform and what Alex has done with Office Hours. And essentially, we'll take an anchor that will formulate questions really from Mukana, or even the person on the ground might ask those questions. And the power of that is we have like the top questions being asked first, which is super cool. And we're also talking about doing some pre-produced packages, because Saturday and Sunday, they'll have some open event time too at NAB. So Monday looks like the show day, but yeah, we're always looking for more help and more people. Right now we have about 10 folks from the Office Hours community pitching in some way, shape, or form. So if you have the bandwidth and you want to help, we have less than a week to put it all together.
And for the coverage the weekend before, and Jeffrey, do you know when Showstoppers is? I'm throwing Jeffrey on the, you're muted, Jeffrey.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. No, there isn't going to be no showstoppers. I talked to Steve directly, and they said they decided to not do it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Is there any other ones like showstoppers that's going to be going on? There was 2 of them, wasn't there?
There's after events. Pepcom never did NAB, okay. Although they did something in tandem with NAB the last couple of years. It's everything is going to be just that. Different companies. There's some that you have to pay for, and I'm not going to even touch those. So
okay, yeah. So we're as press, we're used to, hey, we got free drinks and food. Like, why would we pay for this? Anyway, so the thing is that I think that it'd be great if even if we're going to go live to them later on Monday or whatever, that we put up the videos. And if you guys want to put up a shelf inside of Office Hours, the YouTube channel. I mean, you can put it on your own channel and put it there, but if you want to put stuff on our YouTube channel, you can, and I can help promote that a little bit to push people towards it. But for the Office Hours community, I think that what would be great is that it'll give us time to think about it. So you'll do like a little 2-minute thing about the thing. We'll think about it. You come back to them on Monday, and we'll have more questions based on what you posted there. I've done this almost as many times as Jeffrey has. And my recommendation is always to not interview anybody when you're doing the little 2-minute segments, is just absorb the information that they have in their head and then formulate it into something that's actually useful. I'm sorry, I that sounds a horrible thing to say, but the people at booths are not very good at talking about their own products. Oftentimes they have too many details in their head. And so our job oftentimes as press is to absorb all those details and then formulate them into something that actually is useful for us when we're going to talk about it for 2 minutes. They can talk about it for half an hour and you'll glean that information out of it. And they have all this valuable information to give you, but usually it's too much. And they want to say too many things, or they're not very good at articulating it. And so our job is to articulate it. So what I do is I just talk to them for a little while, and then I take a camera and I do point of view. Just, I'm going to show you these things and then I'm going to walk away, with a clip. And I always, I just record them over again if I don't get them right. Like I don't try to edit any. I do them in one shot, head and tail them, put them up. And if you go up to the my old site or my YouTube channel, is still there. It's got a lot of our stuff in it too. You'll see some of the ones that I haven't done it for a decade because I started doing too much work for other people. Anyway, go ahead, Sky.
Well, I just want to make sure, Noah, that you're planning on the dust storm, right? And last time I was in Vegas, we did a production. We had to have a dust storm. So I just want to keep with tradition.
I can tell you the worst. There's only one thing worse than a dust storm in Vegas, and that's a rainstorm. You're not ready for that. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and we're definitely looking for people who are going already, that have already planned. And if they would give us a few hours Monday morning to help with the stream, that would be great. Yeah. And then we are looking for some light editing over the weekend. But to Alex's point, in an ideal scenario, we'll have a package, right, about the product. And then when we're on the ground, boots on the ground, it's all interview.
Right. And to put it in perspective, like for me, my little style of doing it, I would do 20 or 30 a day. It's like, I would just walk through and just crunch these things out without a lot of, and the phone now is super powerful. Next question.
Next question comes from Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia. Tim says, would you consider Mac OS Monterey on an M1 and Intel production ready? I thought at some point it had a colored dot on the secondary displays.
Go ahead, Bill.
It did, and it does, but there are plenty of little small subprograms that will remove the dot should you want to do that. I've had no problems with Monterey. I put it on in the first week, and it's been running strong now. I'm on an Intel MacBook Pro series initially, so I haven't tried it on the new M1s, but so far, no problems whatsoever, and you can get rid of that orange dot should you want to. That's just there to tell people that their system is broadcasting something. It's a safety feature from Apple.
Go ahead, Serge.
The way I'm using it, I use my Mac Mini to connect to Zoom, and I use my MacBook Air to share anything I want to show. And that MacBook Air does not have any recording going on, so I don't have that orange dot. It's a simple way. I go through my ATEM just so people knows.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think the issue that people were having with Monterey had to do with the collection of programs they were trying to run at the same time. And in my case, I've got an M1, and I think the latest version is 12.3.1. I have no problems. I've had no issues. I do have the orange dot, but that's an undocumented feature that pops up, and you just sort of ignore it.
Anyway, Jeffrey.
Yeah, any of the every production that I've done, I have not had to worry about that orange dot. I've been running. I just updated to 4.1 or whatever it is, and I've not had any issues with any of my videos having to worry about extra stuff like that. The only thing that I always worry about with Macs is sound, and there's always a problem.
The second screen is what gets it. So if you're on first screen, it won't be a problem, but the second screen is what will get you on the orange dot. And so that it's really a problem. And I don't think Apple understands how much of a problem it is, because for us, it's just, the problem is they keep on moving how to turn it off. So they're not just leaving the orange dot up there, but they're making it harder for us to write scripts to get rid of it. And so obviously some idiot has an idea that this is important, at Apple, who's decided that we have to have the orange dot, and as we figure out ways around it, they're going to keep on adding that, and what it will mean is that we'll all have to go back to Big Sur or go to PCs. Like that's what this is going to mean. This hopefully someone at Apple's watching, but eventually this is going to be a problem. Like we're able to hack through it, but if they close it all up and make us have that orange dot, then Monterey is no longer a valid live platform. Like that is, I mean, that's the problem that Apple has right now. And so I think that we need to think about how we talk to Apple about it, because, they're destroying it for live, and they're going to make us move, because it's just, it's a great, overall, I don't know if Monterey's production ready. I'm having all kinds of still idiosyncrasies with it. So I'm not certain it is, but anyway, the next question.
But isn't it lawyers that are involved with that orange dot, and that's going to make it because of privacy wonks out there?
It's just gone too far. Like, it's fine to make it, to have a script that does it, but it's, when there's got to be a way for production people to turn it off. You can't have one screen have some ugly little dot on it. Like, that is just dumb. Like, it's dumb, to do this, like to put something on it that we can't take off. This outlines why when people say you don't want to get caught into an ecosystem that you can't control, that isn't modular. I mean, this undermines Apple's entire argument that we should just keep it all in one ecosystem and it's easy to use, because what has me going is I don't know if I can trust Apple to make products that work for me, and that for me to say that's a big thing. Like, for me to say, I don't know if I can trust Apple to make the right decision, and I don't know if I'm on the right platform, that orange dot is part of that, and so it's really a stupid idea. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California is up next. He says, Zoom is constantly updating to new versions. What are some of the latest features that are most interesting and helpful?
Go ahead, David.
So they had a big release, it seems, and I'm actually really excited about some of the things that they're offering. I was going to show it to you, but of course it's not showing it right now. That's okay. The biggest one that I'm excited about is actually in your Zoom settings, you can now turn on gesture recognition. And I haven't been able to try this, but I think the way it's going to work is that if I raise my hand physically, it's going to then raise my digital hand as well and then move me correspondingly. So unless you're doing production where you don't want people moving around, that could actually be really exciting.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri is up next. Vic says, would a Mac Mini with an Intel i5, 2.5 gigahertz and 16 gigabytes of memory provide enough horsepower to help with office hours question management? And if so, who would I reach out to for training?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It should be just fine, because you're just really working inside a browser in Makana for moving questions from voting area to on deck, and for hitting a button to bring it up at a certain time and take it down at a certain time. So any PC or Mac should be able to fill that void.
Go, Jason.
What Courtney said.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, BlackMagic Design released Resolve 18 as a public beta, but does not appear to have any issues tracking or reporting system. Have you seen anything of that sort?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't. Well, BlackMagic kind of depends on its users to contact them, which they do, and they do listen to the forums that they have on their individual products, and they have a good support system out there. And so when they release something as a public beta, it's not necessarily strictly organized with built-in bug reporting, et cetera, but they monitor the forums fairly closely for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, their forums, the BlackMagic forums, are really good, and they actually they're very responsive. So I would definitely take a look at that. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. Up next, how would you go about switching RTMP sources to go back and forth between two rooms? What workflow approach should be used, and what would the experience be on the other end? And does the stream auto stop and have to be restarted?
Go ahead, Noah.
So I wouldn't directly switch between RTMPs between two rooms. I would basically send those RTMPs to a destination, like a cloud instance or something similar. I know like Restream.io or Vimeo has landing for those RTMPs, and then you could basically cloud switch between those two rooms. So basically you have like a virtual switcher between those two RTMPs, if that makes sense.
Next question.
Tony Mobley, our friend in Newman, Georgia, is up next. He says, what are the signs that an ATEM Mini is failing? I'm one of those people that leaves the ATEM on all the time.
Serge.
I don't know if there's any sign, but the ATEM Mini Pro I had before was one of the one that needed to be rebooted a few times and things like that. I got them HDMI output dead. At that point, Blackmagic RMA that device, give me a new one. And since that, I got no issue. So don't know if it's helped, but.
Tony?
So what I'm experiencing is that I am having to reboot it several times. One of the things that's happening is that with Filmic Pro, it is giving me a black screen, and no matter what I do, I reboot the computer, I unplug the ATEM, I reset the phone. It's just giving me a black screen, and there's nothing that I can do.
And if you plug something else into that input, does it work?
I've moved it around in terms of the inputs. It did not change.
But have you plugged something else into another input there and seen it work? So the first thing you want to do is see if the HDMI itself works. Plug a computer or some other input other than Filmic Pro into that input and see if you see video.
I think, Alex, I have two different things going on at the same time. So I think that there's an issue with the ATEM, and then there's also some issues with Filmic Pro itself. And I asked a question about Filmic Pro as well today. Right. So it's I think it's like a perfect storm of both of these things having problems at the same time.
Yeah, you just have to attack each variable first. The key is to reduce the number of variables and then handle those variables and then move back up again. So you can't solve both of these at the same time. First of all, you have to validate the HDMI inputs. So is every input working? So can you put an HDMI input from something else into the switcher and have it show up? If that happens, it's probably not the switcher. Like at that point, you're probably if you plug into 1 through 4. And you see a video show up on the multi-view, it's probably not the switcher. It's probably Filmic Pro or the cable or the phone, the way the phone's interacting with it. So if you can eliminate that problem, now go back. Now, are you using an Apple adapter for Filmic? And then where did you get the HDMI cable?
HDMI I got from Best Buy.
Okay. Yeah, it should work fine. I can just tell you that we have a lot of problems. I've had a lot of problems with monoprice HDMI cables. So I'm particularly when I say what HDMI cable we have, I'm immediately asking, do you have a monoprice cable? Because there's a lot of issues that we've had with them. But I would first, you got to find something. It could be your Mac Mini, it could be something else. You have to find some way that you can plug something into each input to figure out whether it's the switcher. So if things aren't showing up in any inputs or certain inputs, then you have a problem with the switcher. Especially if something shows up in input 1 but not input 2, then input 2 may have a problem. But you have to figure that out first. You just got to reduce those variables down to something that's more manageable because you're trying to solve too many problems at one time. It's kind of a classic algebra problem. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you covered most of it, Alex. As far as troubleshooting goes, you want to get a stable source of HDMI, like a computer that works all the time, and use that same source and the same cable to test all of your inputs, as he said, on the Mini, and make sure that it gives you a stable signal in all inputs. If it does, then it's probably not the ATEM Mini. If a good thing for testing like that is the MD Cross from Decimator. And it has a series of test signals that it'll put out at the right frequency and that the ATEM will like. So a lot of times you'll see the reason that things will go black is because the signal coming in isn't exactly the right timing that the ATEM is looking for. The vertical frame rate or the horizontal frequency is a little bit off. And this can happen especially on mobile units that don't really have temperature compensated crystals and things like that are very stable in their video output. So it could be your phone itself, it could be the cable, or it could be the setting is just slightly off and the ATEM doesn't like it. So sometimes it can lock onto it, and sometimes it's outside the parameters and it'll give you a black screen.
Good, Jeffrey.
The one big problem I have with the ATEM Mini is the cables and how the cables end up pulling down on all the ports on the ATEM Mini, being the HDMI ports, the USB port. And then, of course, when it comes to the iPad and you have that dongle hanging out of the iPad, that's pulling down on the Lightning port. And especially when you put an HDMI cable, that adds more weight to it. It's important that if you're going to have constant connections, that you might want to find a way to either prop up those cables, tape them down, or something like that, so they don't put too much strain on the connectors, because that's where a problem can come in, is those connectors can stop working. I especially have a problem with the ATEM Mini if you're using the USB-C going into the computer to send stuff through, because I've had problems. A USB-C cable seems to die a lot faster than a regular USB-A cable. And I just had a problem with that with my ATEM Mini, where I was trying to update the software and it kept saying that it was updating to 8.6.4 on the software, but BlackMagic, the software inside, doesn't update to 8.6.4. It only updates to 8.6.1, and I had it confirmed with BlackMagic. And we found out that the cable was interrupting during the firmware update, which it kept thinking was 8.6.4 instead of 8.6.1. I changed out the cable. Boom, everything started to work. So tape up your cables, prop them up, put them onto tables, put them onto surfaces so there's no strain to them, and you might have a better suggestion. And then if you have a very dusty room, remember to turn off that ATEM every now and then and take a can of air and blow out that fan, because that might help on a lot of things.
Next question.
Next one comes from Trevor Harrison in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. I want to do a daily live call-in show, living with disabilities. I have a PR40, a Scarlett, an iMac, and Logic for recording. So how do I take live calls? I want to do it with a telephone, and he invokes the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. So what services just provide the callers?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There's a company called Angry Audio. They make great little problem solvers, and they have a device for you. It's called the Bluetooth Gadget. And it's a little box that sits on your tabletop, and it pairs with your phone, preferably an iPhone or Android, whatever you're using. And it pumps that audio crystal clear quality under the outputs that then you can plug into your Scarlett and have fun with it. So I like these guys. I know there are other ways to get Bluetooth audio back and forth from your phone, but this one's bulletproof.
Go ahead, Bill.
And if you don't want to do Bluetooth, if for some reason you have just a standard telephone line in there, Rolls, one of my favorite little kind of Pacific Northwest companies, has a thing called a phone patch 2, the PI9, and it does this too. It's about $60, and you can plug a phone line into it, plug a phone into it, and put an audio line into it, and it'll do it on your desktop really easily.
Now, I would use Zoom and then use Loopback to output that into Logic. So as a separate feed, I wouldn't try to. I would use a loopback for that, and I would not try to take a phone out and go in, because the phone companies, when you call them, they add noise to it, and Zoom doesn't. So the phone company there's a little bit of hiss that they add to the signal, and the reason they do that is so that you know you're still on. Otherwise, it's funny when it's not there, you think that your call dropped. So that's been added for 50 years or something, or 30 years. So been there for a long time. I think when they got so good, when they moved to digital, and they realized that when they went out of analog, which was adding the hiss naturally, and they went to digital, they had to put it back in because people kept on thinking that they were losing their lines. And so you're getting this little low hiss at like -40 or something. And so you don't want to use that. So use something like Zoom or some online thing. Use Loopback and then send it into Logic and then record it there. But don't go through a bunch of other interfaces. And the preamps on the Scarlett are not very good. So you don't want to use those if you don't have to for something like that that's already adding noise to it. Go ahead, Bill.
And just a quick warning, you also, even though this is for the internet and not for broadcast, you don't want to put people live on the air without some kind of a way to screen them at least a little bit, because you will often get into a group of kids or something like that, and they'll have so much fun with you.
And if you can have someone help you with it, I'm sure you can find someone here to help you with it. You can have someone screen those calls in Zoom again, and then just move them into the room. So you're like, we're all in a breakout room right now. You could be in a breakout room and have one person at a time. Someone else can be working with people in another room and then dropping them into your room as needed. And that's a lot easier for you to work with. Go ahead, Kenneth.
And just a thought, you might want to consider using a Google Voice phone number so that your own telephone number is not left exposed to all the masses who can bother you every day and every night. Use a number that you can essentially throw away when you're done.
Yeah, and I think that I would still use Zoom for that, because then you don't have to give your number. You get a cleaner line. If someone calls you, the quality of the audio is going to go down because of the way they process the phone call. Next question.
Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia says, what are some tips for removing the hall echo out of a recording that was recorded in the hall?
Go ahead, Carl.
So short answer is it's tricky. It's pretty hard, especially in the old days. These days, with Isotope, you can actually do this. There is a feature to remove reverb. The way this is designed to actually, if you've got the original voice and then reverb's kind of in the background, if the entire voice is just reverb, then that's quite hard for artificial intelligence to drag out, because there's no principal voice there with reverb added. The whole point of this was to actually, Isotope 1 is to take out reverb that was added in the record. So some people like to put their effects on that, that line coming in, and they'll put a reverb in there. Because that reverb is a digital algorithm, artificial intelligence can take that out. If it's real reverb from a real hall, that's actually harder, because it's not an algorithm that created that reverb. So you'll get mixed effects with a real reverb versus something that's been added.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Now, Carl has an interesting solution there. The only thing I might suggest is that you possibly could use an expander in the audio chain. Now, understand that an expander, the understanding of an expander used to be that it made the loud things louder, but actually it's a negative expander. It makes the soft things softer. You have to be very careful with the attack that you have. Make it very easy on the attack, and be careful on the depth of the expansion. That has the tendency to reduce noise underneath the signal that you wanted to hear. But if you're not very careful with the way you apply it, it sounds like a gate, and you don't want that, but you might try an expander.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it's very difficult to remove, as Carl said. Deconvolution filtering, where they're removing echo from multiple sources in a live, in an acoustical environment, is very difficult unless you've recorded pings in that same environment with the mic in the same place, et cetera. And in that case, you have a model of all the echo returns, and you can use not only your filtering to remove it, but that's an extremely scientific approach, and you're not going to find it in almost any software that's out there that'll do it competently.
The best one for reverb that I've had in post that I've used, and I've used a lot of them, is Synaptic Unveil. It is specifically designed to remove reverberation. And so, and it is something that I've done some pretty high-end removals of that were horrible. So it takes a lot of work. It's not something you just turn on. You're really tuning it to where you can get it there, and you really need to have a fine ear and good speakers, but you can pull a lot out with that product. It's expensive. I think it's $800 for one solution or something like that. So it's very specialized. Cedar also does a pretty good job of it as well. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia says, I'm having serious problems with the Filmic remote not opening on multiple devices. Any suggestions?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
So this morning I was coming in on office hour after hours, and I was trying to get some help with the other problems that I was having, and Filmic remote would not connect. I tried 2 different iPads. It would not see it. It would not connect. It was showing that it was trying to connect, and then it said connect, as if I needed to try over again. So I tried it on 2 iPads, an iPhone. It would not work.
And this just happened. So this is a system that has been working. Did you change anything about the system?
So on Sunday morning, I was actually preaching, and I had to do an SOS during Sunday to the Mukana chat, and Jeffrey and Guy Cochran came in to help me, because it was like pixelation that was going on Filmic remote, and I thought that it was going out that way, but Jeffrey said that I looked fine. It was just that the device was pixelated, that possibly it was Wi-Fi, because the iPad is on Wi-Fi. It's not a direct connection. And so I thought that was, in and of, that was going to be it. But then yesterday, serious issues with Filmic not recognizing the iPad the iPhone. And so
have you updated recently? Updated any of your software on the phone or the iPads? Or are they set to automatic?
They are. The only thing that has been updated is the iPhone that I use as a camera.
Okay. Yeah. It's but that's the one that would be the most important. Yeah. Right. And the other thing to look at is also plugging it into your ATEM or plugging it into a TV directly without filmic, just because it should show the interface pop up, and then you'll know whether the Lightning and the HDMI are working. Again, the big problem is to just reduce the number of things you're testing at one time. So one of the things to test is, does Lightning to HDMI to a TV work? Like that's just like you always look for things to how to simplify that pipeline. Of I'm only going to test this one thing. I'm not going to worry about whether filmic can see it. I'm worried about whether the TV can see the phone or the iPad.
So the output of the ATEM shows everything fine, but the iPad that does the remote now, interesting enough, now the iPad is connected to filmic remote.
Right.
And so this happened while we're actually on air.
This sounds like a Wi-Fi problem, to be honest with you, but yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I have a different solution, and that is if you've rebooted the iPad, the one thing you want to do is you want to go in and you want to hard close everything. You know how you swipe up a little bit and you see all the screens, and you just start swiping away all the other programs. There might be another program inside there that's actually fighting for control of that functionality to do the remote. Clear all those out, and then just open up Filmic Pro and then see what happens if it comes back in. The next thing to do is to just delete the app from the iPad, delete the app from the iPhone, go back in, bring it back, restore all the purchases, and then give it a try again. Because I think that we're dealing with something cache related inside either the iPad or the iPhone.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, to follow on from Jeffrey, so shut down all the apps on your phone and then do a hard reboot of the phone and the iPad. You can restore, or essentially delete the app and bring the app in for both the remote and Filmic Pro on your phone. The other thing I'll do is your Wi-Fi. I'm guessing you're using the same Wi-Fi router that comes with your internet. Give that a hard reboot too. So turn the power off to that for 30 seconds, turn it back on. Let's clear that Wi-Fi as well, because it does link up via Wi-Fi. So I'm wondering if there's too much chatter if you've only got that one particular node in the house that does your internet. But yeah, so let's just turn everything off and turn it all back on again.
I have done that too. So I've turned everything off. I've reset the ATEM. I've shut down, not restart, shut down everything.
I think,
this morning it was.
We'll dig into it more in after hours. We're going to keep moving, but what I will say is that the first thing you have to not use Filmic Pro. Just see if a phone with its interface shows up on the ATEM, or if something shows up. First, you got to test those ATEM inputs. Then you have to see if the phone shows up. Then try to figure out whether Filmic's going in. But trying to have Filmic go into the thing when everything's an unknown state, there's too many unknown variables. Let's go to the next question.
Keith Harrison, London, says is the new BlackMagic Hyperdeck Shuttle a good solution for a teleprompter?
Courtney, we'll have you kick this one off.
It depends. Now, if you're a YouTuber and you're a one-man band and you're doing your own filming and teleprompting and in front of the camera speaking, it's a good solution. It looks like it gives you a nice big knob to turn to adjust the scrolling. If you're writing your own material and making sure it's correct before you transfer it onto the SD card and put it up there on the teleprompter, that's great. It only has one video output, which means that in order to watch the scrolling in a teleprompter, which was in a beam splitter, you're going to have to flip that image. And it does have the ability to flip the image within the Hyperdeck software. But now every output, even if you split that output coming out, they're all going to be backwards. So if you're going to be using a separate teleprompter operator, that person has to have a non-flipped image. So you either have to have a way of flipping the image, put it out normal, and then flip the image outside of a splitter after a splitter in order for the operator to see it correctly forward and the beam splitter to see it backwards. So that's kind of a problem. So the monitor that you're mounting on the camera has to have its own ability to flip horizontally to give you that mirrored image. Also, editing is going to be a problem because it only reads apparently. I looked at the manual on it, and I'm not sure it can access playback or text files off of an external network connected drive. That would be essential to be able to have a separate person editing the text so that you could have access to it with an edit made. Otherwise, you've got to edit the text on another computer, save it off to an SD card, walk over to the BlackMagic, plug the SD card in, load up that file, and now you've got your changes in. If you want to make a quick change in a line, that's not really going to work for you.
Anybody that's done a lot of teleprompting, as Courtney has, and as I've been on the customer end of this, this makes sense. But the problem is you start adding friction to the edit, and it means that you edit less, which means your script suffers. So when you have a professional sitting there changing the words as you're talking, and you see them changing because it helps you mentally be connected to the script as a talent, you can work with them. There is an organic process that goes on back and forth between the talent and the teleprompt operator that it cannot be replaced with something that's putting there. If you make it harder, you just won't do it, and then your script isn't as good. And so for some people, it's going to be fine. Like it's great to have something there to put it in. A nice little piece of hardware that loads this in, but it's not I don't think any teleprompt operator should feel threatened by this, because it's not going to replace anybody who's actually used a teleprompt operator will not see this as a valid solution for what they're doing. And I also don't think it's a one-person thing, because I think that scrolling requires the brain to do two things at one time, which I would not recommend. I think that's one of the big problems for people is to try to do a script. You have to be present. Like the most important part of being a host is being present. And you can't be present if you're trying to do two things at one time, because you're multiprocessing, in which you're not really doing that. You're just switching back and forth. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, great teleprompter readers can follow the teleprompter operator who really follows them, and vice versa. But one of the things I tend to do with teleprompters now too is I'll route the signal through my video switcher, so I could put that on a multi-view, and then basically I'll send one of my aux outs or even a smart hub or a smart video hub out to the teleprompter, and in the prompter people prompters, it does that flip that Courtney was talking about as well. So that way you have absolute control on what goes out to the talent.
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, all good advice. I think the mistake is comparing it to teleprompter software. It's not great teleprompting software, but it's a nice little gadget to have on your Hyperdeck Shuttle. And if you're doing a one-on-one kind of thing, like I am here in my own room with my own Zoom and my own ATEM Extreme, that'll be a nice add-on.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and if you're doing it remotely, the one thing that I was thinking about is if you take this the Hyperdeck, you put it into your ATEM. If they have a streaming bridge on the other end, if you're doing it remote in that direction, then they can actually hook that up to the TV. You can do all the remote teleprompting from your desk, maybe through a Zoom or something like that. They can make the read and then make that a little bit easier for that type of situation.
Yeah, the problem with doing teleprompting through Zoom, which we've done some, is that the real issue you have with it is that Zoom's compression scheme tends to make it jump because it doesn't see enough pixels changing, so it holds onto those frames. And so for a speaker, it's pretty hard. So what we found is that we had to move to the teleprompt operator having to kind of adjust, and they either parsec or some kind of screen share into the local computer. The local computer does the teleprompt, and they watch it on the other side. So now from the teleprompter operator, and if they're using something like Parsec, they'll see it pretty smoothly. So it works pretty well as long as there's enough bandwidth.
Hence the streaming bridge option to that, because then you can send them a streaming bridge. They can hook it up to their TV.
And what's the delay on
that teleprompter?
What's the delay on a streaming bridge?
20 milliseconds.
The delay,
not much.
Delay with teleprompting.
It's not from teleprompting.
It's not 10 it can't be 10 milliseconds. That's impossible.
20 milliseconds. It's
that's
1 to 2 frames. It is 1 to 2 frames.
It's impossible. Like I haven't seen it run under 500 milliseconds. Like we can't. LA on fiber, LA to San Francisco is 17 milliseconds. It can't be any lower than that. So it's when you measure the round trip with a.
So do you mean networked or do you mean over the internet?
Over the internet, yeah.
Over the internet, you got 200 to 500.
Yeah. So it's at least 500, and usually it's so the thing is, as you add that latency to it, it becomes problematic. Like to do a teleprompt over it, we have enough problems with Zoom doing that. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Viera, Florida is up next. All right, BlackMagic Design, where's that 4K ATEM Mini?
Carl.
All right, so let's count how many cameras Blackmagic make with HDMI with 4K out? They make 0. So how many ATEM Minis do they make with 4K? 0. That's the reason why. So,
what are the chances of getting it? 0.
0. So the thing is, there are the 1, the 2, the 4 MEs. We're hoping to get updated. The greys, hopefully they'll turn black soon. That's what we're hoping, and they may have HDMI. But at the moment, if you count how many cameras Blackmagic make that have 4K out, it's just the Ursas. So
yeah, Noah.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar joke about wrong button there. The Television Studio Pro 4K. That's pretty much the closest thing you'll get to that right now.
Yeah. The whole ecosystem now, so that it's really, you'll have a bunch of people that are upset that they have all these cameras because you just change the resolution on their output, and again, there's so many fish to fry, and Blackmagic's become a big company, but they really are. It feels like they're very much run by one person, Grant, and so there's a certain bottleneck of what Grant's interested in, and obviously Grant was really interested in cloud, and so we, and I think that there's a lot of focus. I think the advantage we get to that is a very integrated experience. Everything kind of fits together and part of his vision. But I do think that it limits how many things happen at one time at the company, and so that's the impression I have from the outside. And so so I think that right now we're going to see a lot of energy around the cloud. We're going to see a lot of energy around the new switchers between the Extreme and the Constellation. And I think we may see more energy around cameras. I would be surprised if I see a lot of other things from Blackmagic, but they surprise me every day because I was surprised that the cloud was actually worth it. Like I looked at it, I was like, I was just being nice to put the show on yesterday in after hours because I was doing something. I was like multitasking until about halfway through, and when it realized to me that I was like, oh, this is really good. Like, oh my gosh, they actually did this. So I think that they surprise us a lot. So we'll just wait to be surprised this week and next week. Next question.
Jamie E. in Alpharetta, Georgia says, can you control Blackmagic Pocket 6K zoom and focus via Stream Deck or Companion, the app via an ATEM Extreme ISO? Also, per Alex's suggestions to consider DJI RS2 for pan tilt zoom, has anyone used the Middle Thing Company's APC-R Gimbal control?
Go ahead, Jason.
You absolutely can. However, there are maybe, 3 lenses that can actually get that and make use of it. And I think they start at, $8,000, $12,000, $13,000. So yeah, but not really. As far as the gimbal is concerned, Tilta makes a really nice head that you can take the battery off and mount it, permanently in. But no, I haven't messed with Middle Things directly, and I can't wait to try.
Hey, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so the Canon compact cine servos, these are around 4,000 each. There's a wide angle, like 18 to 55, I think, and a 70 to 200. They will work. They will 100% work for the zoom and the focus and everything. They're fully servo controlled, but they're the only ones that are under the $5,000 mark until you get up to once you're getting up to some pretty expensive ones there. But that's kind of the option if you're going to do zoom. Of course, Companion can, because there's an SDK into the software, so you can have this button presses this. But yeah, if you want control zoom remotely from the software, you can't do it with the camera control panel. It only does focus. It doesn't do zoom. But you can actually do the Canon lenses, and they actually have a list. So if you go to the manual for pretty much any of the EF mount cameras, it'll tell you which ones can be controlled for zoom, and they have a long list of all the Canon lenses and a couple of the Fuji ones as well.
Next question.
David Paskin in Miami here on the panel says, when bringing one computer over NDI into another via Ethernet, do you need a second router or special hardware, or will it just work over your existing local area network?
I'll go with Jeffrey.
If you would have been on After Hours last night, you would have watched me do that, because I'm actually setting up my remote machine and bringing cameras over left and right. You don't need any special hardware if you're on the exact same LAN. However, if you are on separate LANs, all you have to do is have it being on the secondary LAN. So you have the primary VLAN that's pushing into the secondary router, and then they have a bridge on there. And then you use something like, you use the NDI Access Manager. You pull that up, and then you add in your computer's, your camera IP addresses, so it can understand exactly where to go to make the connection, and then go from there. So, but yeah, can be done.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Courtney in Hollywood. Who's Alan Smithey?
Courtney.
Well, the history of Alan Smithey goes back to 1968 on a movie called Death of a Gunfighter, who Richard Widmark was the main actor, and he didn't like the primary director, and he brought in Robert Totten, I think was the primary director. He brought in Don Siegel as a replacement director. And there was a dispute because afterwards they were trying to decide who got credit, and Robert Totten had directed 25 days, and I think Siegel had directed 10 days. And that means that, and Siegel didn't want to take credit for something that the other guy had directed. So the DGA came up with a pseudonym. They were going to use Al Smith, but they decided that, hey, Al Smith is too common a name because there's a lot of Al Smiths out there that could get credit. So they changed it to Alan, and they added 2 E's to the end of Smith and made it Smith E, 2 E's. And from then on, up until about 2000, it was the DGA approved pseudonym used when there is a dispute over directorial credits on a film or television show. And as a result, there are scores of films that are directed by Alan Smithey and television shows.
Are they listed in IMDb?
Oh, yes. You get a list of, in fact, if you go to Wikipedia, there's a list of all films and television shows that are credited to Alan Smithey. And it tells you who the original directors really were.
Everybody, there's got to be like, someone's got to look at that, just random searches and go, this has to be the worst director ever. Like
most prolific director of all time.
There was a documentary there of Alan Smithey, the worst director ever. And then I just interviewed some guy that says he's Alan Smithey and how what went wrong with every movie.
Did a movie called Who is Alan Smithey?
Anyway, go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, the moral of the story is if your name is Alan Smithey and you're thinking of getting into directing, forget it. You're done.
Yeah, exactly. I usually, I just try to get my name out of it if I'm working on something. My favorite credit is innocent bystander. Next question.
Joe Kidd in San Francisco says, could you recommend a U.S. Blackmagic Design vendor that is great with inventory procurement and welcoming of consumer sales? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, DVE Store, our own guy is just the best. Period.
Yeah, DVE Store is the way to go. I start my searches there, and then if for some reason guy doesn't have that, then I go to the wider market. But DVE Store is a great place to start. You're going to get great service and responsive service, and people are going to solve your problem. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City. I need to broadcast a live panel with a remote guest in a monitor. Think MacBreak with Alex and Andy in the wide shot. We can't get the room light bright enough to keep the monitor from washing out or the stage dark. Any ideas beyond having the guest having a dark background?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the trick is you want to expose for the people on stage. That's not a problem. Then you're going to go into your monitor settings, and it's probably going to be called brightness, picture, contrast, one of those things. And what it is actually is power of the backlight. And you've got to turn down that backlight until, that's how they would have done on MacBreak Weekly, probably in the studio with Leo, is you turn down the backlight until Alex and all the people who are guests on monitors look the same brightness as Leo. So let's say we're going to use MacBreak as an example. So you expose for Leo, get that right in the cameras, and then change the backlight brightness. It'll have different names and different monitors. Change that until they look correct. Now, it is an eyeball thing. You can kind of do it via the eyeball because everyone may have a little bit different. Like when Andy comes in, he's a little bit darker than Alex usually. So you'll eyeball a little bit for each monitor. It's not going to be the exact same value if you have more monitors. But yeah, just eyeball it and eyeball it on the display that's going out. So on your program out, your final program out, make sure they match.
We also sometimes use gray cards where we put a gray card up and we have a video. We actually have a gray card up and then we have what we think is the same gray, that we've sampled there on the screen, and then we move that until it's the same. And we've also used color charts for the same thing where you kind of get them all colored. And you can use, if you really want to get geeky about it, you can have a LUT inserted into the monitor box. So you can use a Blackmagic, like the 8K monitor box, and then you can put a LUT inside of that, and then you can adjust it and make it perfect for what you're doing. Leo does not do that, but I have in the past. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I was going to try to suggest an alternative of having a super source or a composite where you basically have, your subject looking off to the side, and then you bring in the graphic or what have you, the image over top via, another source like that. We've
done that. There's something natural about the way Leo does it, and then when people put monitors in there that kind of works. I mean, I don't really need to be skeuomorphic about it, so I don't really need I would rather just have a super source the way the news does it. But when we try to make it look like a monitor, there or build something that looks like that, it feels like we're working too hard. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there are a number of problems in photographing monitors on set. One of them is color balance. The other is brightness, as Carl mentioned. If a monitor does have a backlight control, and many of them don't, you'll have to bring down the contrast level, which is the black level, and to get the blacks and the brightness to bring the black level down, and the contrast to bring the white levels down. The other problem is color temperature, because most monitor backlights are set around 5,000 to up to 93,000 Kelvin. And if you're lighting with tungsten on a stage, that's going to be a big shift. So what do you set your camera at? So you want set your camera to the color range that the lights lighting the talent are set to. So that means you're going to have to shift your image for your monitor images to the tungsten side. So that means you're going to have to remove a lot of blue from them in your color correction. And the problem with LCD monitors is when you remove blue, it offsets the way LCD monitors work. They're like little shutters, and they have a dimension. And so when you crank the blue down, it just cranks that shutter down a little bit more on all the blue pixels. That means when you get off axis, it's going to shift color radically when you tune them to tungsten. So it's a big problem, and it's best if you can find a monitor that has a controllable backlight that you can control the color temperature of, and they're fairly rare.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jesse Mills in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he asks, what are the known methods to have a Zoom room automatically join a recurring Zoom meeting each time that meeting is opened?
I don't have an answer for that. The only thing I can think of is that if the Zoom room owns that room, it's always there. I think you could join the Zoom room and it would always be there. It would always be open because it's there. So you would use that as your hub. But outside of that, I don't. You might have stumped us on that one. All right, next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle says, Zoom told me it has a new whiteboard. Is anybody using it?
I'll go, David.
I haven't used it yet in real life, but I've certainly played around with it. This is the new whiteboard. It looks to me like it's now cross-platform. So you can access it both within meetings and then also outside of meetings, and you can share it and you can continue working with people on your whiteboard. I haven't seen yet how it integrates into a meeting per se, but it looks like a nice, clean whiteboard.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas says, why don't clouds sync with each other very well? Seriously, they just don't sync with each other or have very good organizational capabilities.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you see, to get them in sync, you have to put them on the cumulonimbus, and it can be a serious problem.
Pun of the year.
Boom.
Oh, that hurts.
That was good. That was so good. Anyway, that's great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't know how to follow that. The reality is, the reality is you have multiple clouds, and unless you're using enterprise software to manage all of those clouds put together, like a Dropbox and a Google Cloud or anything like that, there could always be problems of data loss in anything. So, and of course, if you lose a piece of data, then you go to Google Cloud and say, hey, why is this gone? They said, I don't know, you got hooked up to Dropbox. Why don't you go to Dropbox? And Dropbox will say, why don't you go to Google Cloud? And there's going to be no consistency. You won't be able to, if you have problems, they're going to be your problems, and they just don't want to deal with that.
Yep. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I think, Jeffrey really said it. My analogy was going to be trying to put a Ford carburetor onto a Chevy engine. It's a different manufacturer. And again, my IT friends said why the cloud is a thing is because marketing had to sell something, and a room full of hard drives didn't sound sexy enough. So they came up with this euphemistic thing called the cloud.
I like to call it the cloud. I remember someone saying it's not the cloud; it's just a bunch of computers in a bunch of computers in a room. It's somebody else's
windowless room.
The cloud is somebody else's hardware. Go ahead, Kenneth.
That's exactly right. It's somebody else's spot, and Sky's on point there. Ford parts don't fit Chevrolets because they're Ford parts. And the cloud will not become a conglomeration of groups because every group wants the other group to join them. It's a religious question. It has nothing to do with technology.
The big thing is file structures. I mean, the way every company thinks that they do it right, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google, they always feel like they're the ones that figured this out, and it's their sauce, and they've optimized everything that they're doing for that, and they don't necessarily integrate with anything else. One of the things that came up in our conversation yesterday that really had me thinking, because I didn't think about it until we were doing it, is if Apple, for instance, comes out with all these libraries for building metaverse, but doesn't actually build a metaverse, it could end up with a system where a lot of people use that, and then that could possibly be interoperable. So if Apple's not trying to compete, if it's not theirs, if they're just saying, we're just going to give you all the tools with USDZ and the libraries and all the things you need to put together, but we're not going to do it, you could end up with a lot of people all building little mini metaverses. And if you really wanted to scare all the people making metaverses, that's what Apple would do, because it would just unleash 1,000 little metaverses that can all talk to each other. That's a very scary future for everyone who thinks that they've invested in the right thing. Next question.
Vic Sinise in Lowell, Indiana says, on yesterday's program, they mentioned a virtual conference on virtual conferences. Is there any information on how to find this?
Go ahead, David.
Forgive me for not having been here yesterday, but the virtual event for virtual events is at Powered by Sage. The early bird just ran out last night, so I think it's a couple $100 to attend.
Yeah, and Blue is an amazing expert when it comes to virtual events. He's doing some of the biggest ones out there. I would highly recommend, if you're trying to figure this out, is to go to those sessions and learn what they have, glean what he and his team have figured out. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City is up next. If I need to play a video to an in-house audience via projector and out to Zoom for a hybrid event, can I do this with using two HDMIs coming out of my Pi PlayoutBee? They don't want the Zoom visible in-house.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I would probably use just a simple ATEM Mini vanilla, just the basic ATEM Mini. You take the HDMI out of your PlayoutBee or Hyperdeck or whatever you're using. You run that into your ATEM, channel 1, channel 2, doesn't matter. And when you select that, the HDMI out, so the program out, would go to the projector, and the USB out would go to your computer for Zoom, and then just select that as your webcam. And so they'll both see the same thing. And then that's it. So that would simply be your projector going to projector via the HDMI program out, because it's just seeing the program out for the vanilla, just the cheapest ATEM you can get. And then the USB would be the exact same program out, but for Zoom.
And I would lean towards the extreme only because it's got two HDMI out, so you still have a multi-view. It scares me to not have a multi-view. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, playing that in a Pi would definitely be the failure. I would, if you can go move it up to a laptop or something like that. What I would do is I would do like a vMix or a Wirecast, and then I do they both have the ability to do a single screen that goes to a secondary HDMI or tri-array HDMI. And you can have different things going to different HDMI as long as your computer has the power to do that.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is back with which sync.com pricing plan is best. Pro Teams Unlimited at $15 per user billed annually, or Solo Professional at $20 a month per 6 terabytes. Can just one user have a Pro Teams Unlimited?
You may have asked a question that no one here is using. No one here is at least paying for Teams. We might be on a Teams account, but we're not paying for it. So don't know. Next question.
Moving on, Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia. In an audio-only workflow, what software would you use that is similar to Davinci Resolves layouts and plugins?
Carl.
It's software called Davinci Resolve. Just click on the Fairlight tab.
I was going to say the same thing.
So the Fairlight tab is yes, it is designed for sound to picture, but you can just use it for sound to sound. So, and it's free.
And it looks exactly like Davinci Resolve.
And it uses all the same plugins.
Yeah, I mean, I cut most of my stuff in Logic for a variety of reasons, but I'm trying to learn Fairlight as well. So I've been kind of sitting through some of their. And by the way, the training that BlackMagic does is some of the best. Their live training. They do these live classes all the time. You want to get on that list. And even if you sit in parts of it, I learn something. Anytime I'm working and I'm not having to think, which isn't very often. Usually that's all I have to do is think. But if I'm doing something more manual, I'll put one of those classes on and just listen to it. And every once in a while I look over going, you can do what? Then I go back to what I was doing. And so even if you're not going to take it as a class, it's worth opening it up. They have some great instructors. And they do a pretty good job on the live stuff. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and of course, Fairlight has their own record and playback hardware and software with their own software, and it matches up really well with the free version that's available on Davinci.
If
you want to pay a lot of money and get the hardware.
Yeah, but a lot less than you used to. I mean, I remember when Fairlights were 10 times more expensive than they are, than Blackmagic's made them now. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, could you see a market for real estate operators offering residences geared to the needs of independent creative workers and small businesses, for example, with proper acoustic isolation between the units and gigabit symmetrically internet and so forth?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that bonus room, which is usually how it's listed on on real estate listings, can be turned into anything you wanted, and just with the right writing the right description, you can say can be used as your home office and Zoom room with a little acoustical treatment and a connection to Gigabit Ethernet.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's possible, but you'd have to have the right market, because this is something that not everybody needs. I mean, we're all in this, so we think that there's, all of our friends need broadcast studios in their home and things like that. But I think for the general public, I'm not sure if a construction company could find a way to market that such that a reasonable number, a percentage of their homes that had this would find the right market for it. Now, in some areas probably, but I'm not sure overall that it's beyond what we can do now, which is just get the place and build it in your own room.
Go ahead, Noah.
I can't mention too many specifics, but one of my clients is a giant real estate firm, and they're building new homes, and part of those homes, they have like a community center, and they're building, business offices, but more specifically, they call them Zoom rooms, with the thought of having the technology and stuff built out for those spaces.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, school districts used to be the attractant for certain areas of housing. And so I could imagine that Gigabit would be a real big attractant in today's world and this district has Ziply, has 900 up, 900 down, or Google something.
I've been in a lot of conversations around about how to, number one, get fiber to all the houses and figured out, because they see that as a huge opportunity to revitalize their towns. Their towns that the industry is gone, the thing is, they've kind of gone down, and they're like, oh, if we just made sure that everybody had fiber, or everybody had access to fast internet, it could be potentially an area. My hometown, actually, Freeport, Pennsylvania, where I went to high school, is already got fiber everywhere. And so it's a great town, in case you're wondering. Don't everyone move in at once, but it's really nice. There's a lot of great paths to walk along the river. Anyway, so but the other thing that I was asked to do last year was talk to some folks about what would you need in a room if we were building it from scratch. And what they're literally doing is having a room that is, they're literally floating the room in the construction, because that's the cheapest time to float the room is when you're building the building. And so like they're looking at floating a room. It doesn't have to be that room. It might be a great bedroom because it's really quiet, but it also is a room that's built for, they're looking at it. They're building the Cat 6 or whatever into it. They're building a bunch of things into it. So it's a minor change to the room. So it's not a huge change in the construction. When you think about a building costing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to build, having one room that is just optimized, 15 by 15, floated, without a lot of windows, with some windows, but they're all built the way it is, so that you could just literally turn it on and it would work. And it had all the connectivity into the right places and all the bits and pieces, is definitely something that construction companies are thinking about right now, because I've been consulting. Last year I did a bunch of meetings with them going, this is what you need, and this is how you want it to work, and this is what we need, and we need these things, and we need pinpoints in the ceiling so we can hang things, and we need it to be it's a very minor change in the cost of the overall building to do it while you're setting it up. And so I think that there is a big future for that. And again, there's a lot of rooms we use, like mine was an entertainment room. This was like somebody's like home office or whatever, and I've turned it into a little studio. But you could just have it be the studio that got turned into the home office, and it's the ultimate home office, because when you shut the door, you can't hear anybody outside. So I think that we're going to see more and more of that, along with connectivity. Connectivity is the big one. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. The new features BlackMagic Design announced for Fairlight piqued my interest. Has anyone tried their YouTube training videos versus doing a course with qualified trainers for Resolve and Fairlight?
Sky?
Well, Alex, you just mentioned that you were listening to them and you really appreciated what they had to say from within the BlackMagic universe. I was going to ask you, what was you comparing them to Ripley? Because I was going to go, as a trainer, Ripley understands training.
Ripple.
So Ripple, thank you. And they, as trainers, they understand, and they do real world testing and real world, they get in there and this is how it really works versus the technology people telling you how it should work.
Pretty close relationship between the training that BlackMagic does and Ripple training. So the two of them work together. If I wanted to watch videos, I would get Ripple, to do that. And we've done that in the past. So they put them together really well. They structure the conversation. They've got great sample files. For the qualified trainers, I mean, Ripple is very qualified to do that. But for qualified live trainers, BlackMagic does that for free. So if you go to BlackMagic training, there's 4-day courses on Fairlight, and 4-day courses. In the second 2 days, or one of the days, is all on using Atmos, and there's 4-day things on color correction, and there's 4-day things on there's all these sessions. So if you want to sit down and take sessions from BlackMagic, go there, sign up. You get the email. I can probably find it for you and read it out, but it's like there's usually 6 or 8 in the queue all the time that's doing it, and it's run. It's run by someone who knows a lot about training, so I won't call her out, but she's been doing this for a long time, and so the structure is very familiar for most of us who have done Final Cut training or Avid training in the past, because that's where the pedigree comes from. So it's a very structured, very specific way to learn it. The way I learn, I admit, is that I do projects in it, and then I search YouTube. like that's how I work. I have a hard time remembering. I can't. My brain doesn't. I can't just listen to someone talk about something. So I sometimes put it in the background and I'll listen to it, and it'll prick I'll hear something while it's going on. But usually, like right now, I'm doing something and I just keep on searching. Like I just work on it and I go, I don't understand why this isn't working. I don't understand why this isn't working. I don't understand why this isn't working. And I just search YouTube constantly. And usually I find a video in a minute. And so I organically learn just the tools that I need. It's probably not the most efficient way to do it, but it's the way I learn every package, is just to start doing something and then Google everything as I work. I literally have 2 computers open. One's just grabbing data, and the other one is what I'm working on. And that's how I learn. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, Peter, as a musician, I'm sure you got some multi-track recordings. Just bringing those raw tracks into Fairlight and then manipulate those tracks or mix those tracks and master those tracks to the way you like. And if there's something that you know that you want to do, but you don't know how Fairlight does it, as Alex said, just YouTube it. Just go find, there'll be a video, maybe a longer video, because usually the videos that are pre-recorded for these that are done by BlackMagic are usually 15-minute videos. But go find one of those videos and then you'll find out how to do what you want to do. Because I'm sure you know what you want to do. It's just about how to do it in Fairlight, because it's a different language in a way. But as Alex says, do a project inside of it. Project you may have also done like in another software. Bring it over now to Fairlight, do the exact same project, and figure out how to do it, that project in Fairlight that you've done in something else in the past.
And stay tuned to this channel. A lot of the stuff we're working on with the bands is me being able to have us being able to use the footage, because what I'm offering back is great footage, but what we're getting the bands to agree to, and it may even be with some of the stuff we did last week, is, hey, here's a song, and everyone can cut it. We can all cut that song together and do the audio and do the color correction all as a group. And so I'm gonna, I may have that soon where we put it up. The problem really is the footage is really big. It's like 4 terabytes of data, so I have to figure that out. But we're looking at doing that for different songs for these bands that we've had come in and doing the process. So stay tuned keep your eye on that puzzle. Next question.
Uter Culwin in Brunschotten says, any tips on Unity Intercom instructional videos? I have a show where there are a few people who want the show audio and a few who don't want the audio, but I want to make sure that we can talk, that if we talk, we can all hear each other.
If you're talking about how to make them, I don't know where to find that, but how to make them is just to open the phone, connect it to a Hyperdeck, or open a phone and connect it to your switcher and capture it. And the main thing is to practice it over and over again, so you can be super clear about tips. I'd much prefer 30-second tips than a 10-minute video about all the things you can do with Unity. Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not by no means a Unity expert, but there is, if you open the settings in the client, you'll see there are settings for program level and ducking that will allow each individual client, if they're feeding the program into the Unity server, that's the important part, so that everybody gets it. Then on each individual client, they can adjust the level of the program feed versus their comms and the amount that it ducks every time somebody speaks. So you can control whether it's your left ear, your right ear, or in both ears. the level of the program feed. Those that don't want the program feed can just turn that slider all the way down. So some people can have the program feed, some people don't. You can position it in your left ear and comps in your right ear if you have a stereo headset hooked up to it. And you can configure the amount that it ducks the program level every time somebody talks. So you have all those features built into Unity and into the client software. You just have to route it into the server.
Next question.
Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington says, how does one make an on-the-fly textural change to the teleprompting script in the new BlackMagic Design offering we saw yesterday?
Go ahead, Carl.
So it's something they haven't announced. Its SD card is the only way they showed in the video, but there is a way that we know could work. Simply the software that would run on a laptop or a computer or anything via the Ethernet. Now you could use USB, but via the Ethernet, they just add an extra tab here that's just a text editor. And in the actual shuttle itself, you can choose between where you read the teleprompter from. You can read it from SD card or from whatever they're going to call this, software. And so you can actually have the software and it's just live. So the teleprompter can just write it live and then you just see it. It's just pulling from that tab, that text editor tab. This is something they could very easily do, really, really easily, because they've got the Ethernet connection already there. It's just a matter of BlackMagic wanting to do it in version 1.1.
Good, Courtney.
Well, that's interesting, Carl. I didn't know that they would build it into the software. What I thought the possible solution would be over the Ethernet, if you could, when you hook that unit up, the Hyperdeck, to the Ethernet, if another computer can then see what's on the SD card as a file, see the drive, see all the files on the drive in the SD card that's sitting in the Hyperdeck. That way you could have somebody in a text editor editing the script and just save it out to that file on the SD card in the Hyperdeck over the Ethernet. Whether it can do file sharing while it's in playback mode, I don't know. In the past, that's been problematic. Then the second problem is once you do update the file, then you've got to reload the file in the Hyperdeck, find your way back to where you stopped, wherever the problem was. If it's a 52-page script, you got to come back to that place. And I don't know if it supports bookmarks or markers of any kind to save your place, to come back to that place in a new file. So it's very problematic. It's really not designed for that kind of work.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and in my case, having been on both sides of this, having used a teleprompter as a talent on screen, if the text is jumping around, that is no bueno. I mean, I'm one of those people who read thoughts at a time, and if I get a thought in and I'm about to deliver it and that text changes, that's going to completely take me off rhythm and probably drive me slightly nuts.
The next question.
Next one comes from Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington. What's the biggest, best surprise you saw at BlackMagic's announcement yesterday?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, not the best surprise was the inclusion of the teleprompter. It was a fairly big surprise, but that they would include something like that. Right. The other is the cloud, their cloud architecture, their cloud device for collaborative editing was a pretty good, big announcement and a big move for them.
Go ahead, Carl.
The idea that they would actually do a USB version of their cloud, so which is that their little pod they're calling. So the fact they're actually choosing you to choose a speed, because that's a big thing. So like certain companies like Apple want to make sure that the servers that you're getting from this kind of server, because you could actually put a spinny drive in there, of course, and so you'd get terrible speeds coming out. But they're giving you the option. If you want to use a large spinny drive, you can. If you want to use a fast little SSD, you can. And then if you want to buy the 320 and pay whatever they choose to charge you, you can do that too. I like that kind of range.
You go ahead, Jeffrey.
I like the fact that they're going in all 10 gig. I mean, even the small cloud pod is a 10 gig adapter. So you'll probably be able to, in a lot of cases, bypass that USB-C, plug it into your network and get a better speed than transfer speed than you do going through the USB. So you can actually have that in a nice little area, bring a router with you and get a lot of work done.
Go ahead, Bill.
And of course, my heart soared when Grant took on subscription as lock-in, as a direct shot across the bow of the people who do that. I haven't said anything about it, but I just grinned the whole rest of the show.
Yeah, I do feel like at the speed both Apple and BlackMagic are going with their software and the price point and the fact that they're not subscription-based, I think that Adobe and Avid really have to think hard about what they're doing, because I think that this is going to be very, very hard for them to compete with, at the rate that both of these companies are moving. And I think that that's when you look at trends, you look out ahead and you just go, if I continue this trajectory, where is it going to end up? And I just don't see how Premiere and Avid stay competitive other than their built-in market. But I don't see how they keep on getting new people in when Apple and Blackmagic are doing what they're doing. So I think that it's just going to be a very, very complicated situation for the other providers. It's two big heavy hitters playing really, really hard, and that's the trick. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. When streaming 4K 60 to YouTube, what gotchas have you found, and what things have worked well for software encoders? Well, I use software-defined encoders, which are elementals, and it works great. it's 4K. 4K 60 is really good. As far as software encoders, I have not found that to be successful. We have tried, and the number one thing we end up with is drop frames. We run into issues where the computers do the things that we don't expect it to. I don't want to stream generally out of anything that isn't Linux, because I don't want any OS in the background wanting to do something, and so and taking away resources. And so I tend to want it to be straight to the metal as far as that goes, especially when you're starting to ask it to do a lot of things. But 4K 60 is still pretty computationally expensive. The other thing, of course, is bandwidth. When we do 4K 60, we start at 30 megs a second up. I mean, that's like table stakes for 30 meg for 4K if you're going to send it into an ingest. And so because it's 4K, the math is that a solid 1080p stream is about 6 megs. That's like the minimum. And the way you kind of do this is, and again, 30 megs is not, that's being very, it's doing kind of a minor setup, because 1080p 30 at, and for 30 frames a second, I multiply the megapixel by 3. Like that's my working number. So 1080p 30, 2 megapixel, which is essentially 1080p, is a 6 meg stream. So at 30 frames a second. Now at 60, it really should be a 12 meg stream. And then you got to multiply that to get the same quality at 4K. You have to multiply that by 4. So really, it should be more like 48 megs a second, for a 4K 60 stream, to get really pristine quality. Now I am not that aggressive, so I'll go to 35 megs a second. But you have to know that you really have that bandwidth, because remember, you're going to take that uplink bandwidth and you're going to double it for headroom. So now you're looking at somewhere needing between 70 to 100 megs a second to get a really, really good ingest of a 4K 60 stream that's professional quality. Everything below that, you're going to start seeing the anomalies. Next question. Robert Soji in Los Angeles asks, where can we watch Noah's live stream from NAB?
Go ahead, Noah.
I do want to roll that back a little bit, because it's really an office hours community stream, but we can watch it right here on this YouTube channel. Yep.
It'll be the second hour next week. Second hour, or second, third, fourth hour. We're going to run kind of long out of this, so it'll stay right in office hours. You won't have to go anywhere. Next question. Right, Noah? I'm not speaking to.
Absolutely. No, that's what we talked about.
We talked about it yesterday, so I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand that. All right, next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles is back with, other than the newly announced Blackmagic device, are there any other low-cost dedicated units that can play back ProRes 422 HQ files?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, there used to be, not really. In the Apple world, if you're going to be playing back ProRes, Mac Mini is probably going to be your best bet for the lowest cost. It's not a dedicated device other than Blackmagic. The Blackmagic will play them back in the Hyperdecks. I really advise against playing back 422 HQ files if you're just doing playback and you're not editing or doing anything, or doing any trick play things where you're playing them, high speed or slow speed or backwards. If you're not doing any of that, convert them to H.264. It's a much lower bandwidth. You can then take those files. They look just as good, if not better, than the 422 HQ files. And if it's a high quality conversion to H.264, 10 megabit or higher, maybe 20 megabit, and they'll play back on a laptop. They'll play back on a stick PC, which you can use. They'll play back on a lot of media players that you can get for $25 to $30 that play back H.264 files that are dedicated. That's your lowest cost playback, but I'd just get away from the 422 HQ converter.
Yeah, it depends on what you're putting out to. So the HQ, the big thing is enough bandwidth to really do 10-bit properly. So 422 10-bit with HQ. The other ones will handle 10-bit. So 422 and even the LT will do 10-bit, but there's not enough bits there to really properly manage them. So you'll see some spatial issues with those, and color issues, and so those are usually not best. And where you see those kinds of things between 8-bit and 10-bit typically is in gradients. So soft gradients and things falling off will tend to posterize a little bit, and so that's what you want to kind of look for. We use this is not an inexpensive solution, but we use Softron on the air because it has 10-bit 422 output, and we output that from a BlackMagic Ultra Studio, and that we do that specifically because we're doing HDR work and we need to have all those bits in there. If you're not doing that, I think that a lot of what Courtney said is accurate there. That an H.264 for most streaming works well. What I like to do is I like to have my playback be twice the bit rate of my stream, so I go from the 422 down. So if I'm streaming at 6 megs, I might want 12 megs. The quality, that way I have at least what I need for that stream. Now, if you're going to go out to a really nice monitor, you may want to stay with the HQ because of the 10-bit issues. It depends on what your content looks like. Go ahead, Bill.
And I just want to say, even on the old broadcast world, I still deliver into broadcast monthly, and I have now one station that requires a ProRes HQ file. Out of everything else, it's an NBC owned and operated, but everybody else has gone away from that. So just saying.
Yeah, it just depends. And the other playback is generally hardware, and that is generally things like that are at least as expensive as the BlackMagic devices to play out. Now, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Are there any production keyboards that have programmable keys like a Stream Deck as well as the normal keys?
Go ahead, Carl.
There sure is. So it's been out for quite a while. So if you just Google this, you'll find it. You'll find resellers of this. It's out of Russia, so you may have to get it through Hong Kong at the moment, but through a design studio in Russia. They've been active for probably 20 years now, actually. But yeah, this is actually their newest one. They've actually got a few in the past as well, so you may be able to find some secondhand. But essentially, this was been around since, I think, OLED screens were around. So these are all OLED keys. And yes, you can program them all. So essentially, this is a Stream Deck in a QWERTY design. This predates the Stream Deck probably by about a decade.
This is really interesting. And it's Art Lebedev?
Yeah, Art Lebedev. Art Lebedev. It's a design studio in Russia. They do some pretty amazing stuff. They do some gimmicky stuff too, but they're a design studio essentially. But this is one of the products that they kind of done, and then it got so much traction that they actually did it again and again. They got a keypad version, which looks like a Stream Deck. It's I think it's a 4x5 keypad, and then they've got the full QWERTY one. This is, I think, the second or third generation of the QWERTY one. This has got the function keys and the screen at the top, so the scribble strip at the top as well.
Good, Jeffrey.
Says there's one in Walmart. That's awesome. I was going to suggest that you can take X keys and do a configurable keyboard where you can actually have a keyboard and side keys, and can even do jog wheels and things like that.
Yeah, and almost everything on that website, it says sold out. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of supply issues with getting those anytime soon because of all the stuff that's going on there. Next question.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. In the new apartment I moved into, there's a party common wall. As a renter, what audio treatment can I do to the wall that doesn't involve gluing and so forth? You've seen the butterflies on that wall, he says.
I'll go with Sky.
Bigger, softer butterflies. No, if you can't build a frame of some kind to do some more acoustical treatment inside of that, I was immediately thinking of a curtain. And you can often get big, heavy, drapes of some kind, and they can look very nice, but they're also acoustically treating the buffer between you and your noisy neighbors. Third option would be a clothing rack. Putting your clothes there between the sound and you could possibly be a dampener.
Go ahead, Bill.
Over my left shoulder, it's a Manfrotto auto pole with a double or triple fullness drape on it. That really does a good job of knocking down things. Also, you can build something with command strips that puts up a light frame and do reflection treatment and things like that, it's really going to make it sound better. And if it sounds better, I found that you don't turn it up as much, but that's just me.
Good, Jeffrey.
And don't forget the corners and the edges, because that can always be a point of weakness for sound. And also remember, if you're putting fabric on the wall, you're only blocking the sound from you going to them. If they have like a ruckus party or something like that, it's going to come right back to you without a problem.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you're looking at the difference between sound treatment and sound isolation. And sound treatment, treats the room for reflections to get it to sound better, to eliminate echo. The problem of noisy neighbors and the sound coming through the walls, that's conducthe sound that's coming through the vibrations in the ceiling, the walls, everywhere. And it's going to be pretty tough without disconnecting yourself from them. And, the way sound studios handle it is they float the room. It has no physical connections to the outside of the building. It's floating on either rubber pads or springs or air pillows. And the whole room is separated so that there's no solid connection to the neighboring rooms. And I don't think you'll be able to do that in an apartment complex by any way. So
well, you could, because you're not doing any damage to the walls.
Yeah, you can build another room within your room and
build a room inside your room, and then you'll be
on inner tubes. Yeah,
you'll be good to go.
Get it done. Yeah,
go ahead, Scott.
Got enough money.
Well, Peter, I've seen those guitar amps behind you sitting there, and I'm wondering maybe you should ask your neighbors what they're using to buffer the sound from your room.
In my less enlightened days, we had some neighbors that were on a roof. They'd party at the middle of the night in San Francisco, and what I did was actually put a mic and a speaker out there so it would feed it back to them, and so they could experience what I was experiencing. And I did it just very subtly, so it was constantly echoing back, and they just stopped using the roof. so anyway, it was you had to figure out just the right volume to drive them crazy, and it took me a couple weeks. And then they stopped using the roof in the middle of the night, and that was how I handled that. I wouldn't recommend it. It doesn't make for good neighbors. They weren't in the same building. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has this question. Bitwig Studio has been my main DAW, digital audio workstation, for music production, but I'm growing to like the user interface and feel of Cubase 12, which I can get for $369 US as a cross grade. With the rise of the spatial audio idea in music, will I be hampered if I'm not using Logic?
Go ahead, Carl.
I think Logic is the best step forward for most people who want to do audio editing and get into spatial. I think the price, I think Apple's just going to give you all the features that's going to keep updating them. And I think the amount of users out there, you're going to find a lot of training and a lot of YouTube videos on how to do things if you don't know. Because that's the beautiful thing about Logic and Final Cut Pro is there's so many people using it, you'll be able to find helpful tips everywhere. If you're really serious about getting into like spatial audio and audio recording, then you want to go to like, Pyramix. So Pyramix is like the top. This is made in Switzerland. It's ridiculously expensive. It's ridiculously professional. This is what the first albums that were in Dolby Atmos were mixed on, because this was the only one that could be done. This was like 5 years ago or so. But this is, if you're serious, take a look at this kind of system. You can get a software only version of this, but there is a whole bunch of hardware that's like tens and $20,000. But you can do this with just software only. But other than that, I think Logic is the best bet for 97% of people. 2% of people would be other software, and then 1% of people would be in Pyramix.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Oliver Dekudzi, incredible artist. He was an incredible artist in Zimbabwe, and he's probably in his mid-50s and put out like 18 albums or something like that, or 20 albums by the time I was talking to him. I was at his house in Zimbabwe. We were looking at some stuff, and I said, so who records your albums? And he goes, I do. And I said, well, who engineers it? And he goes, I do. I said, what do you use? He's like, Logic. so he was, and that was years ago, and he was very technical. And it's a very, very powerful app to build those things in. And so I would highly recommend it. I know that's what I'm doing most of my stuff in, even if it's simple stuff, mostly just to stay constantly moving on that interface. That's kind of the one that I've chosen to really learn. Next question.
John Wallace in Pontiac, Michigan says, I've been having an odd issue with my MixPre 6. I have to reboot it each day in order for the audio to pass. I see it in the Mac that the audio device is available, but no signal is shown in the MixPre 6 itself.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I would call Paul Isaacs at Sound Devices and tell him.
Don't call poor Paul out directly.
That's what I do.
That's what you would do, and that's what I would do. But I don't know if we should tell everybody to call Paul. So it's better call Paul.
It'll get it fixed if it isn't definitely if it's a bug in the MixPre 6.
We should have a segment at once a month that's just Better Call Paul instead of Better Call Saul, and just do Sound Devices Q&A. That would be great. Paul's amazing. Anyway, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, up next with, for remote contributions, Stream, Voodoo, and WebRTC services all seem to have the same problem with being the man in the middle. Is this better than an SRT contribution, or if setting up repeated links, is SRT better?
SRT has more latency. So I think that the big thing is that you're going to have less latency and, to be honest, a lot more control for the same price. Or I don't know the same price, but a lot more control with Stream Voodoo to do those kinds of things. It's really convenient. We've been using it more and more for testing, especially when I just need a feed from that person. Like if I want a feed from that person really quickly, they can set it up, give me a magic link. I throw it into a browser, open it up, and hit say and go, and it's just coming out the computer. And you can do it with the Mac app as well. And so it's really really easy to grab feeds. Give me more buffer with an SRT and you're going to get a higher quality feed. If you don't need it to be real time, the stuff I need is real time, less than a couple hundred milliseconds. SRT doesn't get down there stably. So, but if you turn the SRT buffer up to 2 or 3 seconds or whatever, you're going to get a great feed, a better feed than anything you're going to get with WebRTC. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with BlackMagic Design's cloud products offering 10 gigabit Ethernet. What reasonably priced manageable 10 gigabit switches would you recommend? A command line interface and flexible management of APIs would be essential.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
For managed stuff, well, first of all, if you get the Cloud Store, it comes with a four port 10 gig switch built right in there, so you won't have to worry about that too much. But Netgear's usually ones I go for when you're talking about in the, I don't want to say consumer because this is an enterprise switch out there. But if you're looking for something small and portable, TrendNet makes 5-port 10 gig switches. They're not manageable. They're unmanaged switches, but they work really well.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says the BlackMagic announcement was very Dropbox oriented, not really a fan. Do you think there will be other options, or will it be people like me that create solutions for BlackMagic Designs to use Amazon Web Services, S3, Google Drive, and so forth?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the only problem I've ever had, Dropbox works, and a lot of people swear by it. For me, the difficulty is that it seems to put hooks really deep into the core of my machine, such that getting rid of Dropbox, if you don't want it, or if you have a conflict later that shows up with other software and Dropbox, it literally, in some cases, took me 48 hours to get everything out of there because it seems to attach down at the silicon level practically. So I'm hoping that they have other options. It sounds like from what they're talking about, they will, and maybe eventually you'll have the best of both worlds.
Sorry, I got the wrong window here. Carl?
Yeah, so Grant said in the video that it's about a month away before Google Drive will be added. But if you're concerned about Dropbox or Google Drive, just VPN it and just use, the $10,000 to $20,000 machine as your host. Don't use someone else.
Yeah, and baby steps is what I will say. Like, they just came out of it. It's not like they're committed to Dropbox. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, the relationship that Apple had with AT&T when the iPhone first came out was a contract because they needed a conduit. So my gut says they needed somebody to start. And I'm not a fan of Google Drive for my issues, but Dropbox, I've only used it as the server going through the web browser, and detached all of the apps and things in my laptop, and it works and plays nice for me. But my gut says yes, they will be opening up to other platforms in the future.
Next question.
Next question comes from Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota. When ingesting footage from SD cards, do you copy the files and then delete them on your computer, or do you reformat the card after putting it back in your camera? How do you avoid artifacts on your card?
Good, Carl.
So this is something very important for me as a photographer. I don't do either. So essentially what I do is I'll import them. I'll actually back them up in 2 places and I'll leave them on the card. They stay on the card until my client has their photographs. So they actually stay because the card is actually a third backup, and it's actually SD cards. Like if this house burns down, the SD card will probably be fine, to be honest. Everything else will die, but I can get the stuff with the SD card. So when the client has their photographs delivered, I usually wait about 7 days or so. So I have rotating cards. So I'll kind of rotate through my cards. So it actually stay on the card as long as possible till I've got a gig. And then, yes, I always format in the camera I'm using. I have 2 cameras, and there's 2 different RAW formats from Canon. So I have to reformat the card every time I put them in. But it's actually a backup. So SD is one of the best I think it's probably the best archival format, to be honest, because you can drop in the ocean, pick it up 10 years later, it'll still be fine. But I leave them on the card until the client has their photos, and then even then, it goes into a rotation of all my cards. So essentially, I'm burning through my cards, not just one at a time, wait for it to die and then get the next one. I'm actually just cycling through 6 cards at the moment.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, no matter what I do, I always forget. And so I do similar to what Carl does. Because it's great for backup, and there's been times I've pulled cards out a couple of years later and look at the card, and it's like, that's where that file is, and I can actually use that again. So, but for the most part, especially when I'm going out to NAB, I'll probably have a card a day, so I'll put in a new card, and then I'll forget to put in the new card, and then I'll have an empty slot, and that gets in a whole new problem.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I still use sparse disk bundles, which is an old process, but what it does is it virtualizes the mounting point of a card. So once you convert a card into a sparse disk bundle, you can put that on 7 different drives, and no matter which one of those you launch, it launches as if it were a local mount point drive on your core machine, which means that if you're linked into Final Cut or any of your other software, it's just going to all roll in and put you right back you were the day you used it. So I use that strategy.
Next question.
Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington says, is there a Zoom-centric on-the-air light for family alerting use in a home office or studio that follows the state of the mute-unmute toggle?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Now, I don't know about the mute-unmute toggle, but there is a remote, if you look on Amazon, there are lots of, there's lots of these on-air lights that you can get that have a little remote control on them. So you could just use that. Tied to your mute unmute, I guess with Companion, you could arrange something to trigger the remote and trigger your mute button at the same time.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, that's another question. Jeffrey has some expertise in the Stream Deck buttons and things like that. I wonder if rather than using a Zoom signal somehow to key the light, a common keying signal could be used to light the light and unmute Zoom at the same time from some external button. But I don't want to have to spend an Alex to be able to accomplish this. Do you know what I mean?
As a systems design architect, I would never do that because things know what I told them to do, not what's actually happening.
Yeah,
that light has to be a representation of a current state. And so you want it to come from your local Zoom client. And my recommendation, I've been thinking through this a little bit. The question came up, I think, last week or the week before, maybe from you, is I would think about Isadora. And we can, so Isadora and Zoom OSC. So Zoom OSC knows what your state is, and you can have something in Isadora that literally has a red-green state. You can have a little window that's up that's like red or green that just tells you whether it's it's a big giant. You can even put a button under it to tap on it if you wanted to. But I think that Isadora would be a great one because once one of us has built it, or L builds it for us, everybody could have Isadora on it. It's free. And you can have the free version. You don't have to update it, unless you're programming it. And you could just open up this little unit that does that. So that's what I would do is have Zoom OSC and Isadora and have like a window that's open. You can even have it a second. If you want a big one, you can have a second monitor. You could have it up there. You could give it its own Mac Mini that looks at your state and then puts it up there. You could say, oh, I want to know if Sky is muted. So like all of those things are.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's right. There is a great deal of difference between conditioned to perform an act and confirmation that the act is functioning.
But yeah, you definitely want to read it from the state. Yeah, absolutely. Jeffrey.
Yeah, because there was a Stream Deck button option right at the beginning of the pandemic. Somebody built something on GitHub, and it kind of didn't work. And the bigger problem is when you got it on the Stream Deck, the light, if it's in your peripheral vision, the fact of you actually seeing that is going to be very minimal because you're always looking forward. So I'd want to have something on a screen, like even in a little box that would have a tally light on there for it to work.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with Roland and Yamaha introducing lightweight versions of their flagship keyboards, the Phantom -0 and Mode X, respectively. Could you see working musicians switching to them to reduce transport hassles? And he notes, I've seen the Phantom and Montage on many riders.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so what you've actually said there is exactly right. So it's actually not the musicians that provide them. It's usually the touring company So, or the actual venue. So, some people ask for a Steinway piano, of course, if you're doing acoustic. So, but you got to remember that the Phantom 07 is not a new creation. It's just an update of the FA07. So here they are. So which one's the Phantom, which one's the FA? Because they're both still on sale technically, because they can still get the FA07. The FA stands for Phantom. So Roland has just done an update. They've always had this between 1500 and 2000. This is a 70 odd key, 73 key, I think, 72 key version. They've always had this keyboard in their they've always had it. They've actually had two versions of this in their lineup. So it's nothing new with the 07 or the 06 or the 08. It's just that they've now added the Zencore engine. The Zencore engine on top of the Supernatural sound engine. The one at the top here only has Supernatural. The one at the bottom has Supernatural and Zencore. So they've just got a new sound engine. They've just put into new hardware. But they've always had this device. This is a very big gigging device for people who own them and who carry them. But people who are big enough and who have roadies will usually get a workstation, a large workstation, which would be the big Phantom or the Montage.
You go, Jeffrey.
Carl, you took everything that I was going to say. I will say that musicians are sometimes very fickle, and I know many musicians that want to take their old 1970s Rhodes and other types of keyboards with them. They don't want to get into the new stuff. They'll load everything into a truck every day. And I know a guy that every weekend I see him on Facebook. He says it's time to clean out my keyboards and keep them working as new as possible.
I knew a guy that had two cars. They were these Ford Mustangs from they're very old. He always had one in the shop that he was taking apart and cleaning every single part, and he drove the other one. They were both in perfect mint condition. And when he finished one, he would start working on the other. Like he would just literally swap over. And I was like, "Why do you do that?" And he goes, "I just like doing it. It gives me a place to think." And I said, "How many times have you done it?" And he goes, "Oh, maybe 20." like he had done it. And he said, you get to know it better, and it gets to be a little bit better and everything. And it's just nice to have the car that I love. Evidently he was really attached to this Mustang, and it's in perfect condition. And he said, it'll be in perfect condition until I die. And it's just, but it was like, it was his meditation to do that. So when you're talking about doing the keyboard, like rebuilding the keyboard, it's kind of a fun meditation. Next question.
Panelist Kenneth Jones, a bit sad here from Seattle. Every time I start a Zoom meeting, I always tell it to start my video, and it never does. What's up with that?
It doesn't tell you to. I don't understand. Kenneth, can you explain?
Well, if I could explain it, I wouldn't be asking the question.
Your video's
here,
on, so I don't understand how it never does.
Never
is a big word because I see video.
It says join computer audio and start my video, and when I join, and I say, sure. And I come over here on the meeting and there's a slash through start video. So I have to do it twice. And once seems to me that it ought to be enough.
Oh, interesting. Go ahead, Carl.
So there's a setting in video features. Let me see if I can actually bring it up and read it out. But if you go to video features, let's take a quick look. Video, it'll be called stop my video when joining a meeting. So it's exactly what you're asking to do. So that's usually defaulted on. For most people. So
it's not a bug, it's a feature.
It's a feature. So it's actually a button in the video settings for Zoom.
And I actually prefer it oftentimes because it means that I get to join, and I can join in, but I don't have to turn my video on. So it's usually I would consider that a feature. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. What's your fastest, nicest way to create a 5-minute countdown video for a live intro?
Go ahead, Sky.
Now, you said fastest and nicest. So I just went to the stock houses, and both Pond 5 and what's Storyblocks both have things that I put in the Makana here. And sometimes you just need to go to the box mix and just use something that's already on the shelf there. Or you can have Alex and he'll make you a very pretty one, and it'll be custom and in the font you want.
And 3D text.
And 3D text. Well, if you go look at those two links, there's like 1,000 different options there. Okay, maybe a couple hundred.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I got a couple different ways to do it. One is in Wirecast. I'm pretty sure vMix also has a way to do that. I'll have to test that out. Because my countdown boxes are going to take a small little sliver right here, because I always want to be on the video while that countdown is happening. I feel that's very important in my shows. But there are some other programs like New Blue FX has a countdown, and I think Tuomo has something for SPX for a countdown as well that you can use. That won't be it'll be a paid module inside the free software. So you can give those a try. And
Yeah, I have pretty, as might have been talked about, I have a pretty strong opinion about a lot of these. I really feel like it needs to feel like part of your, part of your event. So let me see if I can grab a couple of these here. Let's see. So like, sorry, I have one computer working that I usually show you things from, and let's see if I can. So like this is an example of one we did a little while ago. Now that's using the Interstellar font with the countdown, with the stuff. So it's matching, that look. Here's another example of this is like and again, the text and everything else and every one of these has been, I built, hundreds of these for events. And the reason I don't use a lot of free countdown things is because I want it to be, I feel like it's part of the show. I'm building you a bespoke show. I'm not automatically throwing some kind of countdown in that has whatever font it has in and doesn't match. I ask the client for the raw assets and the fonts. What fonts are you using? And I put something together that works. And it takes me about 10 minutes in motion. So it literally is, you give me that stuff and I lay it all out in motion. And there's a video, I'm not going to do it for you here because we're running out of time. And there's a video of me doing it in some other show. Me putting this together, and I should put it together as one complete unit and just put it up on our site. But it's literally, you take the SMPTE countdown and you have to trim off the parts you don't need, and then you keyframe it to go backward in time, and then you just change the font and put it wherever you want it, and it literally takes 10 minutes. And I'm just like, it absolutely takes 10 minutes to do it. The longest part is rendering, because if you actually run a render every frame, a lot of times I render these out at 1 frame a second, but some of the playback systems don't work that way. So then sometimes it can take a half an hour to render it. And the one that we used at the beginning of the show, that was done in motion with a 3D text, things moving around. You can decide whether you like it or not. I creatively am doing that because you can't leave pixels on an HDR. That's an HDR countdown clock. You can't leave the pixels on all the time or they'll burn into the screen. So the design of that one is everything's constantly moving and nothing is too bright all the time. So anyway, but that was built. Now that took 8 hours to render. It took a long time to render because I had some very specific things I wanted to do that I turned up a bunch of. The problem with motion is it doesn't oversample very well. So I rendered it at 8K so that I could oversample the pixels. Next question.
Next question comes from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. In times of security issues everywhere, what experience has the panel had with signature and or encryption of emails? What works, what not, and how about GPG Suite for Mac?
Go ahead, Jason.
I personally use the enterprise version of Gmail, which does this beautifully if you get a cert from DigiCert. But I think the easiest, fastest way to do it, believe it or not, is Thunderbird. They used to have Enigmail, and now it is straight integrated for OpenPGP. It's just all in the app.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, the trouble with that is I've used PGP/GPG since 2.0, and I have yet to run into more than one person who understands what that attachment is and cares about it. So adoption of this thing is still terribly esoteric, and it's just not a convenient way to do things for the masses.
And I just don't consider my email secure. So that's the easiest way to manage it. Next question.
Eric Nathan in Bellingham, Washington has close to our last question. If you are recording RAW on the Blackmagic cameras, can you use the ATEM Extreme ISO to import the cuts into Final Cut Pro and link the RAW files to the cuts?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the tricky part is the RAW into Final Cut Pro. So as of, I think, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, so this is the state now. So these are the cameras supported in Final Cut Pro, and these are their formats. As you can see, it's a lot of Cinema DNG, but there is one exception. So the one exception is actually the 6K. 6K now supports B-roll. It's the only camera that supports B-roll, so which is interesting, even though the 4K does B-roll. But yeah, so it actually does support B-roll. This was updated at the end of last month. They usually update these once a month. Apple does. What cameras are supported, what formats from what cameras are supported. So you could probably do a convoluted way of bringing in the MPEG-4s from the ISOs and syncing them up to the RAW. But at the moment, it looks like it's only with one particular camera that's supported in Final Cut Pro.
That's a weird. I don't understand why it would only do 6K. Like that's an odd. I'm confused now. Like because they all write the same formats. It's the same software. Like I don't know why it would. Noah.
I haven't done this yet, but I think you could also trigger record. So you could start it in the extreme ISO, record in there, and it'll send the signal via HDMI to those pockets to record in camera as well. So that way you have the sync when you go to edit and post.
Last question.
Stefan Fischer, Würzburg, Germany, gets the honor. Mac OS manages your Dropbox. How to change to another Dropbox if you have multiple?
Go ahead, Jason.
If you can't consolidate, and you really should, get a business grade Synology NAS. I don't know. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I don't let Dropbox install its virus on my computer. It all lives in the web. Like I just download things and upload things via the web page, web client. I will not. That is a virus. Like it is. Do not install that they ask you to do it. You don't have to. That's what most people don't know. They're like, oh, I didn't know I could just do it in the web. Now the hardest part about that is now I want to get everything out of the web. I don't really like Dropbox. And so the problem is historically I have so much stuff up there. It's going to take me forever to get it off. So I pay $75 a month so that I can not get around to doing it. They've made a lot of money from me just not being able to get around, probably thousands of dollars now of me. But I still use it. And there's still old stuff up there that I go up and grab. And so I go, okay, another month. So the downside is you're stuck with it if it's on the web because there's no easy way, of course, to say I want to download my entire library right now. You have to do it like every folder at a time. And I've got hundreds of folders up there. So, you have it for 10 years, you build up a lot of cruft. And so anyway, but I don't let it ever install on my computer. I used to, and then I'd constantly running out of drive space. Go ahead, Sky.
D, all of the above of what you just said. Totally agree. I only use it on the web. And then what I'll do is for my mat in the kitchen, email, I will go in through that on Chrome, and then that will take me right to my mat in the kitchen Dropbox. And then for clapping trees, I'll go into Chrome, make sure I'm in that instance of that, and then I'll type in Dropbox and it'll take me to that clapping trees version of the Dropbox. But no, I long since disconnected the ability to sync and all of that magic that it was a real pain in filling up everybody's hard drive.
Yeah, it's not magic. It's not magic, but not in a good way.
Insidious.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Oh, we did. That was a nice, comfortable 2 hours of exactly 50 questions. I told you we would do through 50 questions, and we did. And so, excellent job by the producers to ask excellent questions and excellent answers from our panelists. It's good to have Carl back and everybody here. But it's good to have. We missed you, Carl. So it's really thanks for coming in.
Nice to be back.
I know it's like the middle of the night there, so we really
it's only 1:30 now, so that's not so bad.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully, you can come on it. We know it's late there. Maybe not every week, but every day. But once a week, it'd be great to see you. It's really fantastic. So thanks, and thanks to the rest of the panelists. We can't do this without you. Really good conversation. Lots of good data today. So tomorrow we're going to spend the second hour watching and discussing the Maxon release. This is an experiment. We haven't done this before. So we'll do that tomorrow. And so we're taking what we do in after hours and putting it into office hours. And it just happens to be because they're releasing it. If they did it at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, it'd be in after hours. But since it's 8 o'clock, I felt like it would be fun to just drop it into the show. So we'll do that tomorrow. All right. Now we're going to jump into after hours. I almost hit leave and start really fast.
That was close. I was going to say.
I almost just jumped right out.
But Mitchell isn't here.
It's so dark in here. There's no credits. I'm
just stubbed my toe.
What are we doing?
The beautiful.
Because we're not on the cumulonimbus.
That was great. Oh, for the win. Write that down. Somebody write
gotta
that
capitalize the bus there. What is going on with the credits?
Doing sock puppets.
Oh, I guess we're not getting credits today. Okay, now we're gonna go.
Bye-bye, all. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.